14 reasons you're not catching fish from your kayak starting now. It's frustrating not catching fish, especially if you're out for a full day. And there's a plethora of reasons why this may be happening to you, and I promise you, if you watch this video all the way through, you'll be better prepared than 90% of the kayak fishermen out there. I'm gonna skip begging you for likes and subs. I'm gonna get this party started with number 14. Have you ever heard of the 90-10 rule of fishing? Essentially what it means is that 90% of the fish are only in 10% of that body of water. So if you're new to kayak fishing, this is a big deal, especially if you don't know which 10% of the water has the lion's share of the fish. Here's some rules that I fish by that help me locate those fish faster. Of course, do your research. I've talked about this in a lot of my other videos, but here's a few more. All right, rule number 1 is stay on the move. Sometimes it takes an hour or two to figure out where these things are. You gotta change up your lure, you gotta change up your presentation, you gotta change up your retrieval speed, and you gotta change your location, which brings me to rule number 2. You gotta know when to fold them, to move on. Guys, I understand it. We have our honey holes, but if you've been in that honey hole and you've tried everything and you still haven't caught anything in 30 minutes, you gotta move on. Here's another tip. If you don't have a fish finder, go get one. It's gonna help you locate those fish. If you don't have a lot of cash, I wouldn't purchase a fish finder for under $120. I believe they are garbage for a variety of reasons. And this last tip, I understand you might push back on me a little bit. Don't fish history. Guys, fish are on the move all the time, depending on the weather patterns, depending on the season, depending on the time of day. So always going back to that same hole at the same time isn't always going to produce the fish that you hope it does. All right, moving on to number 13. Guys, fishing is like hunting. If they see you or hear you, it's unlikely you're gonna have a photo to text your fishing buddies, which is especially gratifying if the buddy that you're texting is one you invited and he wasn't able to come. The problem comes in because most of us, before we were kayak fishermen, we were bank fishermen, and we didn't think a whole lot about noise when we're up on the bank. All right, number 1, keep in mind how much noise you're making with your paddle against the water. If you're really splashing a whole lot getting to your honey hole, I wanna thank you for leaving more fish for me. And the second tip is be aware of how much noise you're making in your kayak. If you're dropping your pliers, if you're really slamming your paddle back into the holder, well, you're not doing your fishing game any favors. All right, let's move on to number 12. We all know that bass can be fickle creatures. One day they're smashing the green pumpkin color, and the very next day, nothing. Then you try it in a couple weeks, and boom, they're blowing up on it again. Here's a few tips when it comes to lure colors. Number 1, match the hatch. A couple ways you can do this. You can walk up and down the bank, see what type of forage fish you find. You can look under rocks, see what color the crayfish are. And if you happen to catch a couple fish and you're keeping them alive well, someplace like that, a lot of times fish will throw up what they just ate, and then you can mimic what the fish are eating. Another tip is if you're out in the water and you're coming up short, change up your color. And I'm not talking about changing it to a different shade of the color you're already using. I'm talking about a complete contrast. For me, if my green pumpkin is not doing it for me, if I'm coming up short, it's time to break out the bubble gum. You think they're awesome. And here's a few more tips. In clear water, stick to your natural colors, your browns, your greens. And in muddy waters, I like really dark colors and jet black. But to be honest with you, it's hard to find jet black Senkos. All right, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite go-to color lure? And tell me why, please, in the comments below. And moving on to number 11. Have you ever fished with someone who you have the exact same lure, the same color, the same rod, the same line, and they're out catching you 10-1, and they're standing right next to you? It's maddening. I mean, crazy. It used to happen to me all the time. Now I do it to my dad all the time. I love it. Oh man, I hope my dad's watching right now. In fact, if you know my dad and have his number, please text him right now and ask him why his son is such a far superior fisherman than he is. The reason that the guy next to you may be out catching you 10-1 is because a lot of times for lures, there's a lot of different nuances that you have yet to master. Here's a few tips to help you out. Tip number 1, twitch your lure. Most of the time, you're looking for a reaction bite. So a twitch or a couple twitches will do the trick. This is especially true when I fish my wacky worm style. A couple twitches and usually the fish will smash it on the paws. All right, tip number 2, slow down a little bit. Fish, especially bass, get a little sluggish in the extremes. Extreme cold, and extreme heat. Slow down your retrieve a bit, you might get that lazy bass to bite. And the other tip is to speed up. In those non-extreme temperatures, fish are actually pretty aggressive, so speeding up your lure retrieve will actually get that reaction bite from that aggressive bass. The number 10 reason you might not be catching fish out of your kayak is because you don't have a plan. You're unprepared. Information is power when it comes to fishing. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but here's some tips for you. Number 1, download a topographical map and study that body of water. Number 2, learn where those fish should be during that season, during the spawning stage. Check out the blogs, other people who are fishing the lake, see how they are catching fish. This is no different than walking up to someone at the lake while you're at and asking them how they're doing it. If you go to the local bait shop, ask questions. After you do your research on the topographical map, circle all the places that you want to fish that day. Pre-rig your poles, fish those conditions. And here's the tip I always do. I always try to have at least one lure that I'm really unfamiliar with and I want to test out for at least 15 minutes. I want to become a better fisherman, and you're not going to do that by throwing the same thing over and over and over again. If you have no clue what to throw, head over to the Deep Dive app, download it. It's pretty cool. It'll show you what the pros throw. If you're tracking with me, please help me out and hit that like button. Let's move on to number 9. Reason that you might not be catching fish is you're using the wrong lure. What you were lighting fish up on yesterday is sucking today, but will work tomorrow. Here's some tips when it comes to lures. Mix it up often. Don't wait too long to change out your lure. I see this all the time. My rule of thumb is I haven't caught anything or haven't had a bite in 15 minutes, I'm changing it up. A lot of times I see guys, they'll throw the same thing over and over again for an hour and a half and 2 hours and catch nothing. That's about an hour and 45 minutes too long. If you need to, set an alarm on your phone so you know when 15 minutes is up, because I know when you're out in the water, time goes fast. And the last tip here is make sure you bring an assortment of tackle with you that you can try out there out in the water. I have these in my kayak crate with my rod holders, and I also put a lot of lures I want to test out in my underseat storage. Makes it really easy to pull those out and change them out really fast versus turning around in my kayak to grab some of these. Moving on to number 8, if you're still coming up short with those fish, you might be fishing at the wrong time of the day. It's a documented fact that fish are more active at certain parts of the day than others. Here's some tips for you based off the seasons and when the fish are usually active during that season. If you're fishing during the springtime, your afternoon to dusk is going to be key for you. Keep in mind that the water has been warming up all day. If you're fishing during the summer, right before sunup is money. It's slower throughout the day and then it picks back up between 5 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. And if you're fishing in the fall, it's okay in the morning and it slowly gets better, especially in the afternoon and evening. Hey, I get it. If you're like me, you get out there when you can. However, if you got flexibility, shoot for these times, it'll increase your chances of landing this bass. Number 7, the reason you might not be catching bass out of your fishing kayak is because of the water temperature. All freshwater species of fish are cold-blooded, which means that their surrounding environment largely regulates their body temperature. What this means is cold water, more sluggish fish, and warm water, more active fish. Now this doesn't mean you can't catch fish in cold water, it just means you need to change up the way that you fish and the type of lures that you use in cold water than you would over warmer water. I'll be completely transparent with you guys. I've yet to crack the code on cold water bass fishing, so if you got any tips there, help me out, throw those in the comments. Alright, number 6 reason you might not be catching bass because your lure is too big or too small. We all want to catch big fish. I get it. You might have heard that big lures catch big fish. Well, that little tidbit of wisdom may be a mistake. Alright, tip number 1, size down. Sometimes those smaller lures will outperform that 1-pound lure you have. It depends on the day, so if you're coming up short with that large bait, start slowly sizing down to see when you pick up that bite. If that doesn't work, I actually recommend sizing up. Large lazy bass essentially want the biggest meal possible for the least amount of energy. So sizing up your lure may be the trick if nothing else working. Number 5, you may be using the wrong hook size. In really simple terms, if the hook is too large, 2 things may be happening. 1, the fish may be able to see it and is deterred, or 2, the hook may be too large and the fish might not be able to grab hold of it. And if the hook is too small, I mean, it might simply just bend out of the mouth of the fish you're trying to catch because the wire gauge is too small. Simply do some research on the fish that you're trying to catch and that should remedy that. Alright, moving on to number 4. Lack of sensitivity. Wait a second. I feel like my wife secretly added this one in here. I don't remember writing that. In order to catch a fish, you need to feel what's on the other end of the line. Not every fish smashes that lure like we hope that they will. Sometimes fish will nibble on it. And if you have a flexible rod or monofilament line, you might have a fish on the other end and not even know it. Here's some tips when it comes to your line. Your fluoro and your braid is going to have a lot more sensitivity than your mono is. Also take in consideration your rod action and the power. This should all match the type of fish that you're trying to catch. Tip number 3, the reason you might not be catching fish is because you're fishing at the wrong depth. Where those bass, where those fish are going to be sometimes can be a mystery, but there are some general guidelines on where you can find them based off of the time of day, the season, and the weather. If you're looking for largemouth bass, those swamp donkeys a lot of times in the spring and fall can be found in the shallows. However, in the colder temperature water, those largemouth bass have a tendency to take a deep dive. Good rule of thumb here is to start testing early on in your fishing trip, and if you catch one or two, take some mental notes and try to find other parts of that body of water that look similar. And number 2 reason you might not be catching fish out of your kayak is that cold front. And man, I hate that word because it's known to shut down a hot bite really fast. Whenever you have a cold air mass taking the place of a warm air mass, you have yourself a cold front. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to mean the end of a fishing day. I got 4 tips for you whenever you feel, oh man, did it just drop 10 degrees? Here's 4 things you can do. Number 1, downsize your lure. Number 2, try fishing deeper. Number 3, start fishing the cover. And number 4, slow down your retrieval. Do these 4 things when a cold front comes through and your fishing day is not over. All right, number 1 reason you may not be catching fish is the wind. What? Let me explain. 1, if you're in a kayak, you don't have a pedal power kayak and you're out there with a paddle, man, any wind is going to be throwing you all over the place unless you have an anchor. If it's not windy, well, here's some lures to use in low wind conditions that perform well. These are gonna be your frogs, these are gonna be your topwater plugs, and these are gonna be your finesse rigs. Hey guys, if you got some value out of this video, you're gonna love this one. 9 beginner kayak fishing mistakes I made and you should avoid right there. See you in the next video or out in the water. Thanks for watching. See ya.